Welcome to my August wrap-up where I'm going to be telling you about all the books I read in the month of August. The goal of today's video is to do it as fast as humanly possible because I don't feel great. I have been sick on and off throughout the month of August. I keep ping-ponging it back and forth with my partner and it's back on my side right now and I don't feel the best, but this is the time. The video has to get done. I'm very particular about having these videos ready in a timely manner for my wrap-ups, so we're just going to push through with lots of water breaks from my emotional support water cup. As always, we're going in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. So we start with the books that I DNFed, the books that I did not finish this month. And I usually tell you more about them, but I'm gonna go a little quicker through them today because some of them I barely started. Two of the books that I DNFed 4 books this month. 2 of them were arcs that I had copies of on NetGalley that I just barely kind of started and I just was not into them. And I'm not in the business of forcing myself through books at the moment. That was The Handyman Method by Andrew F. Sullivan. That was the first one I tried. This is a horror book that I just could not stand the writing style of, and it's really funny because I was talking about this in my members only Discord server, and I was talking about how I didn't love this book, and someone pointed out to me, they were like, oh, you're not an Andrew F. Sullivan girly. I'm like, what do you mean? I've never read from Andrew F. Sullivan. And they brought up The Marigold, which is a book that came out I think earlier this year that I also started and DNF'd. So I guess I'm not an Andrew F. Sullivan girly. I don't know. I did not like the writing style, but I also saw someone on Instagram, I can't remember exactly who it was. It was between 2 people, but I can't remember. I don't want to be wrong. Anyway, I saw someone on Instagram say that they had an arc of this book and they tried to read it. They didn't like the writing style, and then they listened to it on an audiobook and they loved it, and that like turned the whole story around for them. So not to say I would never pick this book up again. Like if it starts getting really good reviews, maybe I would give it a try on audio and see if that changes things, or just like read the finished copy and see if that changes things, since I was reading an early copy. But the writing style just was not it for me. The other arc that I DNF'd, and by DNF'd I mean I read like the first couple chapters and then I just said I'm really truly not in the mood for YA anymore, is Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington. The premise for this one sounds really cool, but I just can't get into YA right now. I don't know why. I'm just not in a YA phase. I'm no longer requesting arcs for young adult books. This was just something I'd requested months and months ago, so not for me. Another one I DNF'd not too far into it was Gone Tonight by Sarah Pekkanen. This was an arc that I had sent to me from the publisher, and when I went back and reread the synopsis, I was like, you know what, that doesn't sound that interesting to me. And I started reading the first couple of chapters of this. I even tried listening to the audio after the book did come out. I listened to the audiobook of it and I just was not intrigued by it. I ended up seeing spoilers for this one somehow. I don't remember how I got spoilers of it, maybe on Goodreads review or something. Wasn't gonna be for me. It's a mother-daughter story. There's a 41-year-old Ruth who's on the run from her past while trying to hold on to her future, protecting her 24-year-old daughter, Catherine. And like the mother and daughter both have secrets from each other. It really reminded me of that Karen Slaughter book that I never read, but I did watch the TV show adaptation of it, and I just was not that interested in it. And then the final book that I DNF'd was Ring by Koji Suzuki, which I did read half of. I read this in a reading vlog that I did this month, so it's featured in that vlog. You could see my full thoughts if you wanted there. I initially didn't like the writing style of this one, but I was really intrigued by the premise of it. But then the further I read into the story, the less intrigued I got as time went on. And then I did look up spoilers and I didn't feel bad that I did not finish this one. I feel like I haven't had a 1-star book in a while, and this month I had a 1-star book. It was Hemlock Island by Kelly Armstrong. This is an arc that I had sent to me from the publisher, and I really disliked it. And I don't often really dislike books that deeply anymore. I feel like I've gotten a pretty good sense of my reading taste. Like I gravitate towards books that are usually like at least a 2 or above, but this one really just did not do it for me. It is about this woman who has this like house on this island that she rents out like an Airbnb to get some money back on it, and then visitors keep complaining about things being weird, like there's blood in the closet and scratches on the door, and then there's occult symbols of things all around and bones and things hung up in the woods. So she's like, I gotta go out there and see what's going on. She ends up going out there. She brings her teenage niece along with her, and then her ex-husband ends up showing up, and his sister, and a cop in town, like his sister or something. It's like a lot of people get together on this island and then they're trying to investigate what's going on. Is this just kids messing with the house, or is there some sinister forces coming against them on this island? And everything about this book, like everything about it, I did not like. I liked, you know, the first couple of chapters, getting the setup of the story. The writing style felt a little bit juvenile to me. I don't mean juvenile in an offensive way. I just mean like it kind of read like a young adult kind of tone in the beginning, but I was like intrigued enough to see where the story was going to go. And then once I got to about the halfway point and I saw what was going on in this story, it was just really, really bizarre. Yeah, I don't know. Not for me. Didn't love the direction it went. Didn't love how things played out. I just thought it read really, really silly, and that just didn't really work for me. Next up, a 2-star, A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan. I really tried to love this one. I really did not. Read this in my reading vlog where I was finishing my physical TBR. I've had this on my TBR for years, and I always thought I could potentially be the one to enjoy it. I know a lot of people don't enjoy this book. I thought maybe I could be the one. It has an interesting concept. It's about this couple who is obsessed with this woman named Jen, who the man in the couple used to work with, and they just talk about her in really weird ways. Like, she really infiltrates their relationship in really toxic and strange and bizarre ways, but that's just a thing that they do. They just obsess over Jen together, and then the obsession gets a little too far. They end up going on a vacation with Jen, and then chaos ensues from there. It's a book where not a lot happens, and then all of a sudden the end is just really, really bizarre. Not bizarre in a way of like the events of what are happening, but bizarre in a way of like it feels really disconnected from the story you've been reading. I thought the story had really interesting potential and set up with the concept and the beginning of it, but by the end I didn't feel like it took a direction that really made much sense to me or really brought together a cohesive story. I talk more about it in that vlog if you want to go check out my full thoughts there. Another 2-star that I had this month is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall, which I read in a recent reading vlog, so I'll have that linked below if you want to check out my vlog where I talk about this book a lot. It was a chatty reading vlog, so I talk about this book for a long time in that video, and it kind of took me on a roller coaster adventure. When I first heard about this book, I was initially not super intrigued, but because of the buzz it was getting, I was getting FOMO, and I decided to pick it up, and it ended up being what I thought it would be, which was nothing to stand out for me. It's a story about these women who are reuniting in their small town. Back in their past when they were children, they had something really traumatizing happen to them while they're out in the woods, and now all these decades later they are reuniting in a small town and trying to piece together the events of what really happened in the woods all those years ago. At its core, this is a small town mystery. It really is reminiscent of books like A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham and I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I thought it was fine, and it's this author's debut adult thriller, and I thought it did a good job. It had enough red herrings that it kept me guessing and trying to figure out what happened, but I also was really familiar with the source material of what very clearly inspired this book, and so I had a sense of where it was going to go. I didn't know how it was going to get there, but I knew where it was going to go. So it lost some of the shock factor for me, which may be a reason that a lot of people enjoyed it. That being said, a lot of people did enjoy it. It's a really popular book. It's getting really good ratings. It just didn't really work for me. Next up, a 3-star that I had this month is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. This was my buddy read for this month's 24-hour horror-a-thon, and I read most of the book live on YouTube reading sprints. Those are still live if you happen to want to check that out and see my updates throughout that process, how I was feeling about the book. I also did a vlog about this one in my new releases reading vlog, so you can hear more thoughts there as well. Based on the synopsis of the story, I had an idea in my mind of what I was getting myself into. The synopsis is very vague and it makes you think you're getting into one thing, but then it really is a different kind of story. It's about all the same things, but it's a differently plotted story than I was anticipating. What it's about is a town that has a really prominent gay conversion camp, and it's a town really rooted in Christianity, and you're following your main character, who is this girl who is affected by the forces in the town. I feel like it's a hard book to describe without spoiling it, which is probably why the synopsis is so vague. I just thought we were going to spend a lot of the book at the gay conversion camp, and that's not what happens, which is fine. I just had like weird expectations going into it, but all in all, I did enjoy the story. I liked the character. I liked the story that it was telling. It was just a little bit too like in your face for me. I typically prefer more nuance and, you know, subtleties in those types of stories. That's not what this was trying to be, and that's totally fine. It was just what it was, but that just made it a 3-star for me. I'm feeling like I'm being really negative because I had so many books in that lower spectrum of the video, but now we're talking about books that I actually did start to enjoy a little bit more. The Housemaid Secret by Freida McFadden. This was a 3.5 star for me. I made an entire video about this book. I talk about if it's worth picking up. I talk about how it compares to the first book in this series. I talk about if you can read it as a standalone. It was a whole big discussion. So if you want like every in-depth thought about this, or if you even want every single spoiler of this, you can go check out that video video to get all of those details or skip around if you don't want spoilers. I talked about this book extensively, and honestly at this point at the end of the month, because I read it in the beginning of the month, it feels so far away from my mind and so far removed, and it really didn't leave a lasting impact on me, but it was a fun popcorn thriller read, as I usually find that Freida McFadden's thrillers are. This is the follow-up to Freida McFadden's wildly popular book, The Housemaid, and in this story you are following that main character just in her next adventures. I won't give any spoilers to anything that happens in the first book. You're just following her after, you know, a couple years after the first book, but it's kind of like its own whole new spin-off story that it's just telling. I guess I'm not in the overly positive part of the video yet because I did have a lot of complaints with this book. I really didn't love the story that it was telling with our main character. I thought it could have taken a much different direction and had a stronger impact and differentiated itself from the first novel more. I wish it would have done all those things, but at the end of the day, it was a really fun read. I just find Freida McFadden's books so easy to digest, so easy to flip the pages through and get lost in. You're always trying to understand these characters' motives and who's really telling the truth and who's really lying, and it just really sucks you in, and they're really fun, easy, fast reads. This is now the third book I've read from Freida McFadden. I've also read The Housemaid and I've read Never Lie, and I'll still probably pick up at least a couple more of her books because there's still a couple more that I'm interested in. I just find them to be a good time. Next up is Falling by TJ Newman, which I give somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5 star. I really love this book. I thought it was really, really fun. I am a sucker for a survival thriller, and I know I'm not communicating a lot of excitement, but that's because I don't feel great. But I did really love this book. I had so much fun with it. I just hated the way it leaned into the story of the bad guys and what it did there. I felt like that just should have and could have easily been different. This is a story about this pilot who's on this plane and he's just flying on this big flight. It's like a big important flight for the airline, and as he is mid-flight on this really long flight, he receives a note that his family is being held captive, and he can either choose to crash the plane and save his family, or his family will be murdered. And I love a survival thriller with an impossible choice. It was just so gripping being put in that position and being like, oh my gosh, what would you do? Like, you're mid-flight, you have all these people's lives in your hands, you can't crash this plane, but you also are watching a video call seeing your family being held captive and you don't want to watch them be killed either. Literally, what are you going to do? And I just thought this author did a really good job at navigating that question, and it is a bit over the top at times, or maybe a bit unbelievable, or, you know, overly convenient as stories need to be, but I still had a really, really fun time with it. My only big complaint was the story that it leaned on for the explanation of the bad guys and what was going on, which I will not spoil for you because that's obviously like a reveal in the book, but I felt like it left things with an unsavory taste in my mouth by the end. I didn't feel like it was done well or necessary to the plot. I feel like it could have been swapped out with literally like anything else and it wouldn't have changed the story. So I did think it was a little bit odd, and that's why it's not a perfect 5-star for me, but I did, you know, really enjoy the storytelling, and I will definitely be picking up more from this author. And finally, I have 2 5-star books to tell you about, which is so fun. I love having multiple 5 stars. The first one is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, a romance. I think I read this in a reading blog this month, but the brain fog is preventing me from remembering what it would have been in, but I'm pretty sure I read it. Oh yeah, no. This was in the Finishing My Entire Physical TBR video, so you can go see my thoughts on this book. But this is one of the very few romances that I made time to read this year. I typically, at this point, really only reserve space for like 5 romances throughout the entire year, and one of those is always Emily Henry's new release, and then I usually pick up like a Christmas romance or 2 at the end of the year. But this book was getting so much love, and it was being compared to Emily Henry, and Emily Henry herself even blurbed it, and so it caught my eye, and I'm very glad that I decided to give it a chance because it was everything I wanted it to be, and it was a perfect 5-star read. In this story, you are following a woman named Alexis and a man named Daniel, and Alexis is 10 years older than him. She's in her 30s, and she is on this path to be this successful surgeon. Her whole family line has always been doctors and worked at this one hospital, and she is just living that path too, being a city girl, living her life. She ends up running into this guy named Daniel, who is much younger than her. He lives a very different life. He lives in a small town, and he is nothing like the guys that she has been with in the past or that her parents see her ending up with. But they end up meeting each other and falling for each other, and a situationship turns into a real big situationship when they realize how hard it would really be to bring their lives together once they start developing real feelings for each other. I thought this book was wonderful. I thought the character development was wonderful. This is my favorite male I've ever read in a romance book. I just am obsessed with him. I think he's wonderful and perfect in everything, and probably Alexis doesn't even deserve him, but I thought this book was just great. It really pulled me in. It gave me all the, you know, warm butterflies that you like to have when you're reading a romance and reminding you what it feels like to fall in love, and it was just really, really good. This book does also deal with quite a bit of domestic abuse conversations and on-page stuff in here as well. So if that's a trigger for you and that's not something you're comfortable reading, you know, definitely be aware of that. That is in the story quite a bit. I found the storytelling to be cathartic, and I thought it did a really good job handling that, better than I usually ever see in contemporary books. So I really enjoyed it, but I do think that's worth, you know, mentioning to make sure you know that before you go into the book. But I loved it, and I'm gonna be reading the follow-up, Yours Truly, very, very soon. I will definitely be reading more from Abby Jimenez in the future. And then finally, my last 5-star book was Looking Glass Sound by Katrina Ward, which was in my new releases reading vlog, so you can see all my thoughts and feelings in that video. This book really is not getting the passion from me that it deserves, because by the time I finished this book, which was like 20 minutes ago, I just finished it right before I'm filming this video. I just finished that reading vlog. I've been feeling unwell, and so I haven't been able to give it a ton of enthusiasm and fully verbalize what I love about it so much, but I do just think this was such a great read. I really enjoy Katrina Ward's writing style. I think she has really, really interesting ideas. I think she has a really cool style of writing, and I'm just obsessed with her works. And this is the second 5-star she's gotten from me in a row, so very excited to read more from her. I still have to read Little Eve, and then I think she has some other stuff maybe in her backlog as well. But this story is really hard to describe. Even after you've read it, it's kind of hard to grasp. It's a very weird one, and it's weird to give you the plot of. It's just a really, really hard one to explain, but it's essentially the story where you're following this guy named Wilder through many years of his life. He vacations with his family at this beach area one summer, and that really changes his life because of what happens during that summer, and you follow the events following that and how that impacts his life. But it's a story about so much more than that, and it's so bizarre, and it's so well crafted, and it's so hard to grasp, and it's so complex, and it's really one that you just gotta talk about with spoilers so you can really talk about the heart of what this story is. I just think it was really impressive. It was really well done, and it was entirely captivating, and it was a perfect 5-star for me. So that is it for all the books that I've read this month. I made it through. What a miracle. Hopefully I'm gonna be feeling better very soon. I feel like I'm on the tail end of my sickness. But let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you think about them, and let me know if I convinced you to pick any of them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.